Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. So I love the Q&A part of talks, and we're not going to be doing that. But if you do want to talk as we're going or afterwards, I'd love to answer any more questions on this. You can go in the Slack channel that we have for Front, or I'm at Ellen Chisa on Twitter or anywhere else on the internet you'd like to find me. And so I had the privilege of attending Harvard Business School, which is entirely taught by cases, which was part of the reason I was so excited to come here. And so I'm happy to be here at a conference that goes through cases to help you learn. And so one of the things HBS always does in cases to get set up is to give you a little background on the protagonist, or the person who's going to be telling you these stories, so you know what their bias and where they're coming from is. And so right now, I'm the VP of Product at Lola. We're a travel company in the Boston area. And I started at Lola on basically day -90. I started as an entrepreneur in residence when we were still an incubator for a lot of different companies. And so now the company is 55 people, and we recently raised our Series B, including from Google Ventures, and they are, as Daniel said, very helpful partners to us. And so before that, I was at Kickstarter, which is a crowdfunding company based out of New York, and we're also going to tell a lot of stories from there today. And one other thing on the HBS case method is that when HBS goes through a case, the idea isn't just that you have the case to give you the answer. It's that it gives you a bunch of different stories that you can take and pull apart and analyze and decide how you want to use them yourself. And so today, as I tell you stories both about Lola and about Kickstarter, I hope you'll do just that. I don't want you to just walk away with my roadmap framework and say, all right, I'm going to institute this wholesale right away, right now. I want you to look at it and say, these are the pieces that are going to work really well with our organization the way it is, and these are the pieces that probably don't quite fit for me, but maybe I can use them for inspiration later. And so please keep this in mind as we're going through this, especially with some of the more controversial parts. And so going back even before that, I started my career at Microsoft. And that's where I want to start. While I was at Microsoft, no one asked me to come stand on stage and talk to all of you. No one was really excited about anything I wrote about product. And then one day, magically, overnight, that changed. I got a job at Kickstarter, and suddenly, people were interested in what I had to say. And it was confusing to me because it was literally an overnight transition. It went from no one cared at all to everyone cared a lot, and nothing had changed about me. Nothing had changed about what I knew about product. And that really got me going on this one question of, are you good at product? Am I good at product? What does it mean to be good at product? And like any good PM or UX person, I started going around and asking other people how they felt about this and what they thought it meant to be good at product. And so I got two primary sets of answers to that question. One set was very tactical. You're not a good PM unless you're very technical and you know how to write code. You get the same thing with designers. You're not a good designer unless you can build your own stuff in HTML and CSS and JavaScript. Or you're not a good PM unless you know how to run a perfect A/B test flawlessly. You're not a good PM unless you can write your own SQL queries. You're not a good PM if you can't do this or that or the other. And I know designers get the same thing since the role is so broad. And so that wasn't very reassuring, because there's so many different things that fall into the worlds of PM and design that you're never going to learn all of them. And you're never going to be able to say, yep, I'm done. I've checked the box. I'm great. And so this kind of got me to this conclusion of, you're never going to know if you're good or not. You just have to keep learning. The other answer I got I liked even less. And that was, oh, it doesn't matter what you do. You're just good or you're not. You're born with this natural sense of this design, this natural sense of product vision. And if you don't have it, you're stuck, and you're never going to get into the PM job or that design job. And I hope that not too many of you in this audience have heard this, but throughout my career, I've talked to so many young people who are excited about getting into our fields to only be discouraged because they don't have some natural born thing that the rest of us have. And that seemed really unfair to me. And so I started out caring a lot about this for myself, and that changed over time. Now, at Lola, so Lola is a personal travel service, and we have a team of in-house travel agents. And our team of in-house travel agents refer to themselves as the Wombats. And this is a photo of Wombats. They're a marsupial from Australia, like two people here, who are not marsupials, but they are from Australia. Sorry. But like the travel agent team really wanted to create this cohesive identity for themselves, and so they kept coming back to this Wombat thing. They all bought Wombat mugs. They all have secret Wombat talents. And as we built out the product team, it went from me being the only person on the team, remember, employee at day -90, to I needed to start hiring. And so instead of hiring externally and trying to find people who already had that skill set or already magically good at it, I said, well, I think that people should be able to learn these skills. And so what if instead of doing all that other stuff, I tried to teach them how to do this myself? And so I started hiring over from the Wombat team, And so I hired 3 people who'd never done any sort of product before to start trying to learn about how to do product. And so it started really well. The first one, I taught how to file bugs. And then after we got through filing bugs, we went through how to triage bugs. And then we went through, after filing and triaging, we went into how to do release management. Next one started kind of on the other side, really friendly, really empathetic woman. I had her start with, OK, let's coordinate the user research calendar. And now let's think about how we write user research scripts. And now let's think about how we synthesize that data. But at the end of the day, we all know that when you're in a product role, you eventually come to this part where you have to do the backlog and the roadmap. And like Teresa was saying yesterday, it's hard to go to a conference and see things that aren't the type of things your company does. So I'll give you a few examples. Really early on, your backlog roadmap is probably a bunch of Post-it notes on a wall. Then probably for the first year and a half at Lola, you just have a spreadsheet with all the things you're thinking about working on. At Kickstarter, we use Trello to keep track of all of our priority projects, our side projects, our bugs, and then what we've already shipped. And then at Lola, we've started using this really robust tool called Target Process, which you can kind of think of as being more like Pivotal or Jira. But the problem is, the roadmap, the last thing I went through trying to teach to the Wombats, is the part that feels pretty magical. I don't know how many of you feel this way, but when you've been doing product for a while, someone could just give you a list of random stuff, and you look at it, and you're like, oh, I know the answer. And so at first, the Wombats would come to me, and they would say, OK, I have this list of random stuff I'm really stressed out about. And I would say, all right, this is the order it goes in. And I realized that wasn't going to help them get good enough at this fast enough. It was creating this reliance on me as our team leader to do all their backlogs for them, which didn't help. And they weren't going to be able to build the intuition for how to make their own backlog fast enough if it meant that they could only do it every time they came to me, and they didn't have a way to think through it. And so every time, the boss wants this, the teammate wants this, I heard this in a user interview, I heard this thing from the metrics, what am I going to do about it? And so rather than answering all those questions myself, I wanted to give them a way to think through it that they could build on, and that's what I'm going to give you today. So basically a way to go about balancing all of these different inputs and turning them into our hopefully magic happy roadmap. And so I'm going to talk you through a few different ways of thinking through this and the ways that I've broken down different types of product projects over time. And so at this point, I kind of think of them in the categories of art projects, projects with users, and projects with metrics. And so let's start with the first, which is the scariest, projects that are really more like art. So I want to go back to when I was at Kickstarter. One of the projects I did at Kickstarter, my role was specifically oriented around backers, but part of what we cared about with backers, people who were giving money to creative projects, was how we could also get those people to start their own creative projects and become creators. And the entry point to that was the start page. And the start page actually hadn't been touched since the first year of the site. And it's just a soft page. Pretty much most people could only see above the fold. They couldn't even see that How Kickstarter Works section. So they just sort of saw this thing that tried to give them a call to action. And so me, being a PM, I'd worked for a few years. This is fine. We'll just update this. It'll improve the metrics. Done in a week. No big deal. I don't know how many of you know about the history of Kickstarter, but most people, and me going in and why I thought that was how we were going to update the start page, think that it's a technology company. And so it is a technology company, but it's a lot more of an art company. Perry, our co-founder CEO, who's since moved on, but at the time we did this project, he was still there, sitting in the middle, had started Kickstarter because he'd wanted to hold a concert in New Orleans, and he didn't have the money to pay for the artists to come. And so we thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was a platform where I could have all my friends chip in $20 for tickets ahead of time, and then we'd be able to hire this musician to come and perform for us, and wouldn't that be great? Yancey, his co-founder, to the right, was a writer and an editorial director at the time. And so I came in with this product mentality of, it's fine, we're going to set a goal, we're going to update these screens, no big deal. They came in with this mentality of, we're going to make this in a very artistic way. And so you can kind of see that reflected throughout Kickstarter now if you look at it. Of the 15 categories on the site, only 2 of them are at all related to technology, which is technology and design. And the majority of them are really back to that arts root that the company came from. And so I didn't understand that going in. And I'm going to read you the quote from a book that helped me understand it the best and what I wish someone would have said before we started this project. And so this is from The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. The professional arms himself with patience, not only to give the stars time to align in his career, but to keep himself from flaming out in each individual work. He knows that any job, whether it's a novel or a kitchen remodel, takes twice as long as he thinks and costs twice as much. He accepts that. He recognizes it as reality. The professional steels himself at the start of a project, reminding himself that it is the Iditarod, not the 60-yard dash. He conserves his energy. He prepares his mind for the long haul. He sustains himself with the knowledge that if he can just keep those huskies mushing, sooner or later, the sled will pull into no. And so that's pretty much the opposite of the process most of us use to build products. I don't know about all of you, but right now, I'm much more on a cadence of we're going to ship something every 2 weeks no matter what happens, which is pretty much the opposite of I'm just going to sit here and work until we're done. And so when we started the Start Page project, I was thinking it would be very clear. We would have goals. We did not. Instead, we started not with metrics or user needs or scenarios or anything like that. We started with a mission. And our mission was, if you want to build a ship, do not drum up the men to gather the wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea, which is a quote that's often it's often quoted from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. There's some controversy over if that's true or not. But our idea was we wanted to create this sentiment for creators. And so we just started building based on that. And so we went through 11 different versions of this page to get to something we were happy with. And I'm going to walk you through a few of them. I can't do all of them. The first one, we interpreted that quote very literally. And we're like, OK, Kickstarter helps fund creative projects. We think everyone has a project in them. And as a PM, looking at this project originally, I would have been like, good enough. It's in this very popular band style from 2013. It has some nice imagery of what types of projects we have, movies, music, painting. Great, sounds good. And I would have shipped this, and I would have been happy with this. But that's not the way an artist would make a painting. They would just keep working on it in their studio until they thought it was the perfect thing. And so we kept going. The next one, we had a new designer on staff who really liked illustration. So we did a fully illustrated version of the page. And I'm only showing you a little snippet from each of these, because it's hard to show the full page since it ended up being really long. But we redesigned this entire bottom-to-top page for each of these different aesthetics. And so then we were like, OK, it's one thing for us to pick an aesthetic, but we want to be getting these creators front and center. We think they're the ones who can best tell the story of what this platform is for and why you should be funding your creative work. And so we made a version where we would add snippets, but almost every piece of content on the page was a video of a creator. We learned a lot of things from doing this. The first time we built this, all the videos auto-played when you rolled over them, and so you had this very disconcerting experience with lots of gobbledygook as you scrolled down. And we liked this too, but it still didn't feel quite right. So the next one, we're like, OK, what if, good product design again, we can get people to already feel a little bit committed to their product and project by having set some things on that very first page. You're already going to tell us what kind of project you're going to start. You're going to tell us where you live. Both of those things are probably pretty easy for you to figure out. I just ran a project. It was very easy for me to be like, I'm thinking about a book. I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And so we thought about that. Again, not quite right. We liked it, but we didn't really feel like we were there. And so by the 7th or 8th version, we got around to this idea of, oh, we should be showing people what this actually looks like. People had no way to see our creator tools and understand what they were going to have access to. And so we wanted to give them a preview of what it would be like to run their project before they got there. And so around this time, we started to feel pretty confident. We were going to take all these things. We were going to take the best aspects of each of them. And we're going to build our product accordingly. And so that would be great. But the other thing about the artist's way of doing things, I'm just going to click through this, because I don't think the video will work very well, is that when you realize something could be better, you make it better. Even if you're supposed to ship in 5 days, and you're really worried about the technical risks of the project, it doesn't matter when you're thinking about the artist's way. You want to make that exact perfect vision of what you want to have. And so 5 days before we were supposed to ship, someone had this great idea that it would be really cool if, in addition to having this tutorial of how the project would work, you see it evolve from 3 screens to 8 screens, we could give them kind of a real-life taste of that moment of celebration. And so we got to the point where we actually spent the weekend filming a video where real-life confetti fell in over this fake laptop. This was all of us sitting in the office the entire time trying to get this to work. And it ended up being really cool and really worthwhile, but it went against everything that I had in my instincts as a product manager. It was creating more risk. It was making my team work over the weekend. It was going to cause burnout. It was this detail thing. It didn't really matter that much to what we were doing, but it was really, really cool, and I think it was worth doing. And so by the end of this, we'd spent 9 months. And 9 months is a really long time to be redoing a soft page for. We had other projects going at the same time, but it took a lot of iterations. And so one of the things that made that worthwhile for us is that we didn't just give up on all those other iterations. Some of them didn't end up making the final version of the start page, which you can still see. It's still there. We used them in other ways. So this entire sketching aesthetic actually became a huge part of the page that we made when we passed $1 billion in pledges. Same thing, these creator videos and the way we did those also came across in the $1 billion pledge page. And then we went back and we added these dropdowns later. So we didn't have them in the first version of the start page we released, but after I left Kickstarter, someone went back to the concept, and now instead of seeing the entire creator experience when you first click the start button, you get the part where you're starting a category project called title. And so all of these things helped make us have more research to go from for the entire website, not just for the one page. And so sure, it took a long time to go about doing this and do this work, but it ended up being really valuable. And so I think the types of projects that our projects are really good for is when you're going to get way over here. You're not just trying to get to the top of, it's going to be a little bit better. It's you're going to do something totally new. And I know this seems a little contrary. We like to think as product people and designers, we're always building the thing for the user. We're going to talk about that too. But this is something that really helps you break out of what can be known already and get you to a completely different place. And so what I like to tell my team about this isn't every project. This is genuinely only for when you're trying to break completely new ground on something. And so the times that you want to do that, when you're first starting out, this is what happened at Lola. At the very beginning, myself and Paul English, our CEO, and our other co-founder sat down, and we said, we want to make a chat product to help people chat with a travel agent and have a better experience with more personalized travel. And so that was the thing that was going to get us here. You also see this when people start to branch out from their first product. You finish your first product, everything's going well, you have enough revenue or you have enough funding that you're ready to split your company to do something new. You spin up a new team. That's another good time to be looking at projects like this. At large corporations, this tends to be more like labs teams. Like OneNote, the Microsoft Office product, spun up in a completely different team than the other Office pieces. And same thing for the other new one that shipped recently, Sway. And so this art way isn't for all the time, but it's important to not just dismiss it out of hand. It's also important to be thinking about it because oftentimes, especially at an early stage startup, the people you're going to be working with are accustomed to doing it this way because this is the first way they built something, and you're sort of trying to get them to the next step. And so that next step, the one that is very comfortable probably for everyone in this room, is the idea of using your users to figure out what to do next and working with them to build something new. And so this is my default way to build things. I went to engineering school, but the engineering school I went to, Olin College out in Needham, believed very strongly that engineers were not good engineers unless they could think about who they were building for and why they were building for those people. Which meant that I was taught that when you were starting something new, no matter what, you went out and you talked to 12 people. And then you learned everything about them, and then you came up with a unique insight based on those ideas, and then you built from there. And I think that is really comfortable, and it works really well for a large part of the time, and so I frequently come back to this. And so at Lola, when we built the first version of the product, originally it was just me, sitting by myself, being the travel agent, answering things via iMessage. And then once we felt confident about that, we decided to beta test the new platform, both for the tools we built for our in-house Wombat travel agents, and also for the external thing. And this was something that I'm really glad we did before having a public launch. So it helped us to really hammer out the things that users had issues with in our initial product that might have prevented us from getting the adoption that we wanted. So the first one, background sync, it turns out is extremely important. And so we had a lot of users early on, and I just like this because I think it's funny, but we had users who would be seeing the push notifications on their lock screen of their phone, and they would open the app and they wouldn't be there because the background sync hadn't kicked in yet. And that's the sort of thing where you don't want your travel plans in an app that feels like it's going to lose your data. And so if we'd launched publicly and this had happened to a bunch of people and they had written about it, we wouldn't have any customers. And so it's important to start to see the things like this that you sort of overlook if you're the person working on it. And same thing, we would bring people in, and as a product manager in this case, before I talked to users, I was really reluctant to build anything that I didn't think we needed to test and validate. And there are a lot of things in that category, but a big one for me was stuff that's normal in chat. Like, of course chat has timestamps and read receipts, but if I'm going to be building a chat platform from scratch, do I really want to waste my time building read receipts when I could be building something really travel specific that we could learn from and make sure it works before we give it to everyone? And if I hadn't brought in a lot of users to talk to them about this, and by a lot I mean 10. We did a round of 10 right at the beginning. It wasn't that I needed to talk to 100 people to figure out they all cared about read receipts. If we hadn't figured this out, it wasn't going to feel like a finished product. The product wasn't actually capable of not being a beta without adding all of the features that people think of as being core to chat. And so we've kind of continued on this vein. And so the way I like to think about this, and I learned this from Sam Clements, who's the VP of product at Insight Squared, is that when you're a B2B company, a lot of times at the beginning, making that first sale is really, really hard. People want you to add a ton of things to the product. But you get there and you manage to make that sale. Second sale, still pretty hard. Next sale, still hard. And then at some point, the sales start to get easier. It starts to levels out because you've built all the things that people in your initial target really want to have. And that's the point at which you have to think, OK, where am I going to go find someone who's hard to sell to? And how am I going to build up that next set of capabilities to be able to get there? And that's what I think users are really good at helping with. You get to a point where you've built something where you have a chunk of users who are willing to use it. Maybe your first 100 beta people, maybe your first 1,000 true fans, maybe the first 10,000 people. But then you need to think about, how am I going to get to the next order of magnitude of people who want to use this? And you're not going to figure that out without talking to people. And so we still do this at Lola. We spent a lot of time iterating on the chat product. It now has enough chat capability that people believe that that's how it should work, and it does not feel like a beta. And so we started thinking about, how do we iterate on our hotel personalization product instead? And so we built another app that just focused on that, and we launched another beta for that, which you can get to from our homepage if you want. And that helps us talk to more users about this other set of things that we're doing. And so what I want to come back to, and why I brought up both of these examples as betas, is that when you're doing a beta, especially if you're doing it through TestFlight or one of the platforms that only lets you have a limited number of users, sometimes PMs try to do those and then say, oh, I did it to get the data out at the end. I want to figure out how many people are using this, how many people are using that. I'm going to A/B test some stuff. And actually, these beta programs aren't very good for that. You actually need a really large number of people to actually scientifically understand if it's going to work. And so for us, if you look at a 5% conversion number, and you want to know if some change has had a 20% impact on that, you need 8,000 people per variation. You can't put that many people into TestFlight. And so I think a lot of times people want to ship their beta and be like, oh, it's a beta, so I can look at the numbers, and it'll be fine. I'll have this great idea after. And I would really encourage you to think of, the beta isn't a way for you to get numbers. The beta is a way for you to get 2,000 people who are really easy to recruit for user interviews. You can email them, they'll email you, you can talk to them. And it's really more about the qualitative input you're going to get from those people and figuring out who's really engaged with the product, much more so than it is about looking at what was the conversion rate out of these 2,000 people. Particularly in travel, when most Americans don't travel very often, most of them aren't going to be booking frequently enough to see that anyway. And so that's how I think about users. When you're talking to users, maybe it doesn't give you the magical new idea that takes you completely in a different direction. And it probably doesn't help you optimize like a teeny tiny thing, because different users will tell you different things. But it really helps you see, where am I going to go next? How do I take this product that's pretty good and take it up to the next level and get to that next order of magnitude of people? And so you're probably starting to see there's a little bit of a pattern here. I think of these projects as being a process that you go through. When it's a brand new project, you're starting by breaking ground, doing this totally new thing. And then you're going to do a bunch of things that are related to talking to your users and figuring out how to level up on the work you've already done. So then the third piece, metrics. When I originally started thinking about this talk, this is the one I feel like when I started working in product, everyone was like, you have to know about metrics. You have to think about your metrics all the time. Everyone was very, very into this. And particularly, we talk about metrics in the context of checkout and in the context of onboarding. And so you've probably gathered this already, but I like to be a little unconventional with my product discipline. And so with Lola, we decided to make our onboarding interview really, really long, which is pretty much the opposite of every other onboarding on the internet. And the reason we decided to do this was that we thought we'd be able to make better recommendations for people in terms of what they should book if we knew a lot about their travel preferences up front. And so I didn't want to spend time optimizing that onboarding flow, but it turned out I had to at least know how it was working and make sure it wasn't taking all of the people out of the system. And it turned out the really long onboarding flow was totally fine. It was 14 questions with 3% drop-off over the 14 questions. And so every single time I would go to a board meeting or an executive team meeting and we'd have a conversation, someone who was wanting to be really helpful with the product would say something like, but how's the onboarding flow? Have you optimized it? And that really wasn't the point at which we were at. But it was nice to be able to pull out the chart and be like, it's fine. And there's a point at which 3% does matter. When you have millions of people, 3% becomes a lot of people. When you're at the beginning of your startup, 3% isn't necessarily what's going to matter. And so I always encourage people, particularly on my team, when they're working on something new, and someone's saying, oh, you need to optimize this thing, to say, really? Are we at the part where we want to be optimizing this thing? Or are we at the part where we're not really close enough to optimize? We need to still be thinking about how to get that next level of users. So the optimization will actually matter. So I think that's pretty straightforward. The other way I like to use metrics is a little more interesting. So going back again to Kickstarter. And again, please take these stories and use them as you will to figure out how you want to apply them. One of the first things I did was I got assigned this project that we called Leanback. And this had been a dream of the team for years. There'd never been a PM who was focused on backers before, and this was very much about helping backers browse Kickstarter videos to figure out things they'd want to support, a complete alternative instead of going through kind of the search functionality that we had. And because everyone had been thinking about this for years, they were really excited about it, and everyone had their own vision of what it should be. Our CEO, Perry, wanted it to be a way for people to browse videos differently and to be able to see some of the best videos that Kickstarter had to offer. Yancey, who was a writer before that and ran all of our editorial things, wanted it to be a way for us to be able to make videos in-house that we could share with people in addition to the creator videos. And then Charles, who was our co-founder who focused on design, wanted it to be much more like a fun, playful browsing experience. And so, being a good PM, I took all of these requirements from all three of them, and I came up with a solution that I loved, which looks like this, which doesn't look that exciting, but it let you do basically all of these things. You basically had the ability to see a completely random video, or to continue on what you were looking, things near you, things in the same project category, and we could add things to it for the editorial team. And so, this project always makes me think of a poster that I bought, because I think we do this a lot as PMs, and it goes back to what Amelie was saying yesterday about ego. Complex problems, when you have a simple answer to them, it's usually wrong. This answer felt really elegant, and it felt really cool, and we shipped it, and no one used it. And so it would have been nice if we'd figured out that no one wanted to watch a bunch of videos in a row before we'd gone through the effort of building it, but everyone was really excited about it. We considered it to be one of these visionary projects we wanted to try. But we knew that it was time to take it off and kill it from the site because it wasn't actually helping anyone find and back projects. And so as much as we liked it conceptually and as much as it felt like a really elegant solution, it didn't work. And you're not going to see that without looking at the metrics. And so metrics also tell you when you should be stopping. And if you go to kickstarter.com/video, that page is no longer there. And so going back to the Wombats, I gave the Wombats this framework to help them kind of sift through all of the projects. And so instead of being able to say, I have this thing or this thing, they could sit down and they could say, what am I trying to do for the business right now? Am I trying to help the business get to somewhere totally new? Am I trying to help the business level up to the next place? Or am I trying to help the business optimize or stop something that we're doing? And so by giving them this space, I don't tell them the answer to their problems, but I give them a way to go back to what do they think they're trying to achieve, align on that goal with me and with the rest of our leadership team, and then make decisions for their backlog accordingly. And so I know what you are now probably thinking. We did not really talk very much about the fact that they still have all these other things from all these people on the team that are a little bit different. So I want to talk about how the team plays into this. And so a lot of the time when you're working with your team, they want to work on something because it sounds fun. And this is not OK. I wish it was. I like working on things that are fun too. But I really like this quote from Mark Headland. The answer isn't that you're going to just go work on whatever your team thinks is fun because you want to build that good relationship. The relationship is important, but you need to find another way to do that besides just being a pushover. And I think the other thing this comes back to is a lot of the time when the team gets frustrated with the PM or with whoever's making the backlog, it's because the person who's doing it, they're a little bit insecure about it. You don't want to admit, like, I don't really know if item 5 is more important than item 6. I'm pretty sure item 5 is more important than item 6. So you try to present it as, this is my magical PM knowledge, or my magical designer knowledge, and this is where we're going, and please don't argue with me because I know, I promise. And I think that kind of perpetuates this harmful idea that teams can't get involved. And so there's two ways I think about the team playing into this roadmap. One is, how confident are you about the items on the roadmap? So the HIPPO is, I don't know how many of you have heard of the framework, highest paid person's opinion. And you get this from CEOs and from managers a lot who say, well, if you're going to come to me, you don't have any data, I'm just going to make the choice because that's my prerogative as the highest paid person in the room. And I encourage PMs to do the opposite of this. Whoever is the person in the room who's closest to the actual work being done, if it's a toss-up, they should get to choose. If you're not confident that item 5 is more important than item 6, and someone on your team genuinely believes that item 6 is more important, do that. You're going to get a lot more buy-in from your team, and chances are if you actually had a toss-up situation anyway, you didn't know. It's half dozen one, 6 of the other. The other one is on timing flexibility. Sometimes you're in the situation where this thing actually has to be done next so we can ship, but sometimes you're not. We actually had this planning last sprint. One of our product owners came to me and said, hey, one of our engineers has been working on Android bugs for the last 3 sprints. He wants to get to work on something else. We have this new feature we could build, but I also really want to finish these Android bugs. And I said, well, what happens if the Android bugs get done first? And he was like, I don't know, it's fine. And I was like, OK, what happens if the other thing gets done first? And he said, it's fine. They both need to get done for us to get to this point. And so at that point, if it doesn't matter what happens first, and someone on your team is really interested in building one of the two things, let them go first. That way they'll have this buy-in, and they'll trust you more next time when you come to them and say, no, really, we actually need to get this done first, and here's why. Because it won't have been that you've been standing there in front of them saying this every single time. And so when I think about how the team plays into this, I think about this as the team is what's keeping you going. The team is what's helping you maintain momentum. And there are going to be a lot of times where you have other projects that have to take precedence. And so every time you can find a chance where your team can get involved in this process, and your team can actually win that argument about what goes in the roadmap, and it's good for you, by all means, do that. That's what's going to give you the goodwill and the energy and the relationships to keep going through everything else that's challenging about your roadmap. And so to go through these 4 types of things again. Art projects. This is when you're looking to break ground and do something new. And you want to break out of what you've been working on as a company, either because you're a new startup or because you're investing in something new. Users are what's going to help you get to the next place. You're going to take that crystallization of an idea you had, that MVP, that first thing, and you're going to make it better for those people. Metrics are, once you're at enough scale where this is going to matter, you can go through and you can tweak and optimize. Or you can use them to figure out that something that you're doing doesn't actually work. And then your team. Your team is going to be with you every step of the way, and they need to be built in on the process. This means you should be talking to them about what the overall business goal is, what you're trying to achieve, and how this stuff ended up on the roadmap as opposed to other stuff, and how they can have input there as well. And so I'll leave this for a second so we can look at it. And again, going back to the case study thing, maybe you find that this isn't the right cycle for your team. This has been the right cycle for my team. This has helped us think through what are we trying to do right now overall, and how are we going to find projects that help us get there, rather than just saying, oh, we have all this stuff. Let's put the stuff in order based on what feels right. And so I'm going to pause there for a moment. I think the only reason that this matters so much right now is that it takes us a really long time to build things. And when it takes a really long time to build things, it's pretty high stakes. It means that if you put the wrong thing first on the roadmap, or if you picked the wrong type of project, it might be a while before you can fix it. Maybe you'll run out of money before you get to try again. And I think that's really unfortunate. And so I haven't told anyone this publicly yet, but at the end of the month, I'm going to be moving on from Lola, and I'm going to be working on something new that sort of tries to re-envision that question of how can we look at our development processes and make them 100x better. And that's the note that I want to leave you on today. I hope you can take something from this talk or for something else here at front and make your team 10% better this Friday or on Monday right away. But I also hope you leave and you think about how, as product managers and designers, can we make the whole idea of building software 100 times better for all of us. Thanks.